several copies of about 10 or 12 more copies of the introduction to Ezekiel. I will lay them up here, and if you come up here to get one and there's not one there, let me know, so I'll know to get some additional copies. And it is a good introduction. Not that I wrote it, because I didn't, but it is a good, thorough, easy to understand introduction into the prophet Ezekiel. Now, to finish Revelation, I hope tonight. Okay. Yes, I said that before. Yes. Chapter 16, we covered this last week, but I just want to start with that briefly, because that is where, in the vision, John sees the complete overthrow of the enemy of God's people, the Roman Empire. Now, 17, we now get a close-up view of the harlot, or Babylon the Great, she is also called. And she is first seen, and it's not in the slide, in 14:8 and 16:19. We've seen that the harlot is Rome, viewed from her commercial and seductive standpoint, verse 2. We've seen that she is brutal and vicious, verse 6. We've seen that her success is due to her military support, which is, it'd be nice if I had my Bible open. Her connection with the beast of, let's see, 16 verse 3. Because of her sitting on a scarlet beast, she is supported by the scarlet beast, which is civil Rome. Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 is where we first meet that creature. We see that her demise was in part due to the same principle, 12 through 14. That is, these client kings, when it came down to it, actually entered into the conflict as enemies of Rome, which is what client kings do when they get a chance. They will rebel when they think they've got a good chance of victory, but if it's me against Rome, they won't try. But when Rome began to weaken, that was the outcome. We also learned the identity of the sea beast. That's the scarlet beast that we see in 13:1, with its heads and its horns. And folks, that is not easy. That chapter's part of chapter 17 took us 2 or 3 weeks to get to. But I'll tell you the identity of the sea beast starts with verse 8, the beast that was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss. In order to figure that out, you've got to know the identity and a little bit of the characteristics of the first 11 Roman emperors, which is what we're dealing with. Good evening, John. Now, after a close-up look at the harlot who has already fallen in chapter 16, we are now ready for the description of the fall of the empire, so to speak. First, in the fall or the death of the Emperor Domitian, who was the one who was giving the Christians of John's day fits. Anybody who's looked at chapter 17 have a question? Okay. 18. The reasons are given for her, that is the harlot, Babylon the Great, her fall, the extent and nature of the punishment are made clear. We see the lament of the merchants, and this great commercial power falls. That was Rome from her seductive and commercial standpoint we talked about earlier. And she stands as a burning warning to all nations and at all times to leave my people alone or to suffer the consequences. And you'll note in this summary, I didn't get into the details. I just kindly went over those, and if you've got a question, now's the time to ask, or send me an email, or call me on the phone, and we'll discuss it. Okay, chapter 18 is a look back, by the way, to chapter 16, and 19 is a look back at the fall of Babylon, which begins with a series of hallelujahs, verses 1 through 5, at their happiness, glee, joy at seeing finally the fall of God's people's enemy. The fall of that lady has long been desired. The scene is one of delirious joy and is described in the terms of a wedding feast, an occasion of joy, verses 6 through 9. The battle, which is the basis of the fall of Babylon, is described as involving the Lamb and his holy array, that is in white, his followers, verses 11 through 16, and which has already taken place, by the way. We're looking at the past. The outcome is so sure that the angel puts out an invitation to all the birds of the heavens, in verses 17 and 18, to come and feast upon the bodies of the dead being here the enemies of God, because as far as the battle is concerned, the battle called Armageddon, it was over in just a second. And none of God's people are seen in the vision as dying. Yes, sir?
You said that we're looking back, that this is already
16.
happened. Yeah. Do you mean that John was looking back?
All I mean is that what he saw in chapter 19 has already happened in chapter 16, and we're just looking at it in a close-up view. And that's what 17, 18, and 19 all are. A look, focus, and information and some details about what was.
This is kind of been the theme in the book, that you have a chapter showing destruction and all this kind of a quick overview, and then 2 or 3 chapters later you have a description.
Some details.
The details.
Yes, later, after the fact. Yeah. Yeah, good point, John. The 2 beasts are cast alive into the lake which burns with fire, and the smoke of their torment goes up forever, because they stand as an example of utter defeat. Even today, they still stand as an example of utter defeat. Verses 19 through 20. Okay. Thank you. The allies of the beast are seen as killed by the sword and then eaten by those birds which were invited to the battle before it ever took place, telling us that we were guaranteed of the outcome of the victory of the Lord and his white or holy arrayed followers, because there would be plenty for them to feast on, the losers. And they are not cast into the lake of fire, verse 21, yet. Questions? Comments? Head scratches? Not even a head scratch. Okay. Chapter 20. And this is a series of questions. And I think I did this a little bit when we got to chapter 20 in the course of the class. Why is the devil said to be bound 1,000 years? Verses 1 and 2. To indicate that he is perfectly and totally defeated in reference to his use of Rome as his agent against the Lord and his church. Why is he loosed a little time? Verse 3. Because after Rome there will be others to oppose the church, and that little time is the way the future efforts of Satan are covered. Remember, you can get away with things in a vision that in a normal conversation you can't get away with. Ezekiel does some of the same things. You are allowed a lot of poetic license in a vision. And we've seen plenty of that as we have gone through the book of Revelation.
This one also, but not only would this little time be others of the church, the signs right, it would also be including the rest of the
Roman emperors.
Roman emperors, that the 9 other.
There were roughly 10 or 11 Roman emperors that persecuted God's people. This book was written because at the beginning, and the first one, Domitian.
I thought that Nero had,
Nero was, that was not official policy of Rome. That was one man who was a little bit crazy.
and it was not just in Rome.
It was only in the city of Rome. And he was looking for somebody to blame for the place burning down. So he blamed Christians. So John doesn't even mention that one. But Domitian made it Roman law or policy to do this. Now, as you read through the rest of the emperors, that law becomes subject to change. The next emperor didn't do that. About 2 more down, it was reinstated. It was not constant. Look,
1,000 years, your explanation there goes against what is normally understood in Christian.
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does go against it.
I'm sorry?
Yes, it does go against what is.
Yes, it does.
At least in premillennial.
It goes against everything in premillennial understanding.
What do you
Yes.
think 1,000 years is?
Well, when you're a premillennial believer, their first tenet or doctrine is that the Bible is to be taken literally. Period. And if it says that there's going to be 1,000 years where, in verse 21, where the devil is bound 1,000 years and Christ is going to reign 1,000 years, and since that hasn't happened literally, then it's still future. And so, it's still sometime in the future. And even they, at points, abandon their take that everything is literal. At certain points, when literal understanding of a phrase or a verse is just outrageous, then they will abandon ship and call it figurative. Okay? And that's what I have tried not to do. Now, how successful I've been, I don't know. But God bless them. At least they believe the Bible. I mean, they believe if it says 1,000, it says 1,000 years. I'm sorry?
I may not believe other things that are said in the Bible as literal to everybody, but
Yes,
this part,
they do. They do. Where did we get to? Oh, right before verse 4. To whom was judgment given, in chapter 20? To those who sat on the thrones. These are God's people, the victors, who represented the saints who lived to see Rome go under. What of those who died in faith to Jesus? Sorry, thanks, John. They are presented as experiencing a resurrection in the vision to thrones along with their brothers. And this is just a visionary device to show how God views these people. They are exalted and precious, and they are seen as exalted to rule with Christ. Why is the reign said to be 1,000 years? To portray its perfectness and its completeness. And we showed look at some verses in the Old Testament, which pretty good job of corroborating that. Why is their resurrection designated as the first? Simply this, to differentiate it from the next one, which he sees the second. If John says there's a second resurrection, what does that tell you? There must be a first. So we try to find the first if we can, although it's not absolutely necessary that you do. But I think it's in there. Who are the rest of the dead in verse 5? Those who didn't die for Jesus, but in service of the beast. Satan's followers. Why don't they live again during the 1,000 years? Thanks, John. You need a whistle. Because that's an experience only for the triumphant saints who are victors over Satan and Rome. What do they endure? They endure, that is, the rest of the dead, the followers of Satan. They endure 1,000 years of death, while the saints are seen as doing what for 1,000 years? Reigning. The saints are viewed in the vision as reigning with Christ. The losers are seen as being dying or being dead for 1,000 years. That's how the vision shows it. You may say, I would have said it some other way, and I probably would agree with you. But this is the way God chose to show John in the vision the points that he wanted to get across. And also this, we are 2,000 years and culturally miles away from the time and the circumstances and the culture of when this was written. Let's see, they endure 1,000 years of death while the saints reign, and then they're resurrected to die a second time, the lake of fire. What does this second death symbolize? Utter, irrevocable defeat. Satan will be released after Satan to be released after the 1,000 years, only to be finally defeated, verses 7 through 10. And the judgment of Satan's followers follows in verse 11 through 15. And I know this is quick for those of you who weren't here, but that's what a review is. Specific questions? Let me know. Chapter 21 tells us of the triumphant church, God's people. It is located in the new heavens and the new earth. The whole world of the Romans is seen as destroyed. Remember, we went through that in the trumpets and the bowls, where the sky, the sea, the rivers, the mountains, the streams, everything was viewed as being struck, the Roman world. The whole world of the Romans is seen as destroyed, and God creates a new one for his people. Again, this is in the vision. But it is the triumphant church on earth, not in heaven. It has not moved into heaven. It still shines among the nations and brings light to those who walk in darkness. And you can see that throughout the chapter yourself. The figures used to show its, triumph and glory could just as easily be used of her eternal abode in the heavens, as far as we know. But that's speculation. But this is not what John used them for. Most of his language comes from the prophets, especially Isaiah, as this context shows when we looked at a lot of verses from Isaiah. It is used in the same fashion as the language of the prophets. The prophets spoke of this present age under Jesus, and their language paints the ideal picture. Remember, men will die, young in 100 years. Infants don't die. So, there'll be no more tears, no more sorrow. It paints an ideal picture for God's people after they have come out victorious against Rome. No enemy, however large or strong, would ever dent a wall of Jerusalem. Now, where did the New Jerusalem come from? It came down out of heaven. This is the perspective of chapter 21. The picture in chapter 21 is of a new universe after Rome is defeated, and a huge jeweled city coming down out of heaven and resting upon the earth in the vision. The people who live in that city are smiling and happy. They have no fear of any invasion and death. It is a huge city having 12 gates and 12 foundations, and it is 1,500 miles broad, long, and high. To give you an idea, Tennessee is about 300 miles across, east to west. So it's as long as 5 Tennessees laid end to end, and broad and tall, all the directions. It's a cube, like the Holy of Holies, the holy place in the temple. It is a city full of supernatural light that is God-given, and it is in this light that the nations of the earth walk. The city is honored, and foreigners bring their glory into it. Questions? Head scratches? Yes, sir?
Nations of the earth walk in the light from the city, but are not in the city.
They are not in the city, they are not part of the city, but they benefit from the light that the city gives. And I think that's a concept easy to understand. You are the light of the world, Jesus said. And that's what we're supposed to be. Last chapter, we see the river and the tree of life located in the New Jerusalem with all of its blessings and provisions, which are yet available, still available for those outside the city. Her glorious vindication is described much as the temple is described in the book of, guess what? Ezekiel. The book closes with a solemn warning that its message is to be taken seriously, and any tampering with it, that is, adding or taking from it, adding to or taking from, would result in the individual losing his life, his right to the tree of life, and his place in the New Jerusalem. Okay.
That's a little scary for me when we place it, talking about the words of this prophecy and how easy it would be to not understand and to add to or to take away from.
So don't you think that's a deliberate, conspiring effort he's talking about here, rather than the fact that, my goodness, I don't think guilty of that, because right now, I'll guarantee you, some of the things I've said throughout this class are W-R-O-N-G. I'm sorry?
So that was pertaining to Rome and God's people at that time, just like everything else.
Correct. Correct.
And there were those,
That's my understanding.
and there were those that had the gift of knowledge and understanding at that time that could have explained it in clear terms for them.
Yes. And I don't have that gift.
We could use one of those.
We sure could. We sure could. Okay, it is with a fond adieu that we bid Revelation goodbye. If you don't have any more questions, John. Go back. You're joking, I hope. Oh, okay. Yes, sir. I think I have one. Yes, I have one more. And let me know if you need anyone needs some copies of the review. I can still have some more made. Okay. All right. Give me your name.
Margie.
Margie has a spare one if you want to give one.
What would you say the main thing one needs to keep in mind when you think about Revelation?
The main point is God's people are going to be victorious no matter what. No matter the odds.
No matter the time.
no matter the time, whatever the circumstances are, no matter how impossible the enemy seems to be to defeat. And of course, they looked at Rome as, we don't stand a chance, never
Was the
will.
ultimate power in the world at that time. That was the ultimate power.
Yes, and that's why we see the view in chapter 4 of the God on the throne, and chapter 5 with the Lamb and his followers in heaven, still in complete charge. And then we see in chapter 7 the Lamb still in charge with 144,000, still ruling, and that does, I think there's another place, but I can't remember, and that doesn't change throughout the book, as if God is up there trembling at the power of the Roman Empire.
Would the fact that this is a vision be highlighted on the main point?
Well, as far as the main points, to me, no. No, by far the main point is that God's going to see that his people are vindicated and victorious, even though he doesn't guarantee a smooth trip through it. Psalms 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. He doesn't say, well, I'm going to show you a route around that, so that you don't have to experience all of the bad things that are in the valley of the shadow of death. You go through it, you experience it, but you are with me. And the last thing Jesus said, one of the last things at the end of Matthew was, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world or end of the age. You might say, well, why didn't God rescue or prevent his people from dying? He's never done that. Go back to the book of Genesis and what happened to Abel. The first righteous offspring is murdered. Okay, it's just part of life here on earth since Adam and Eve, and we have followed, introduced sin as the disaster that has caused. God has not promised even his people that I'm going to see that you get through this and live to be 110 and never have any problems.
Children of Israel went through 400 years of slavery.
They sure did.
And then 40 years of wandering before what was left of them and all that was left of them was a righteous remnant.
Yes.
Even then.
Yes, because every one of them that left Egypt died. Except, Joshua and Caleb, yeah.
So in all the deliverances, the children of Israel they fell to Assyria, they fell to Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and even after that, only a remnant came back.
Yeah, Persia, and then Greece,
Right.
and then Rome.
And so in each of the cases, God spared
The righteous.
remnant of his people, the righteous remnant. But the most of his people were taken away in these sins.
Yes. Yeah. Does anybody have another thought of what's their main point? Your main point that you got out of Revelation? I'm just telling you what I got out of it. That it's a vision, it just means that's the method through which the message came. It's not part of the message itself, which that's why I don't.
Yeah, I can see that. The problem is, we talk so many.
Oh, you do.
This is.
Oh, you do. You do. You say, well, how can that happen? How can you have a beast come thrashing out of the water with 7 heads and 10 horns? Or how can Jesus be represented as a as a lamb with, 7 horns and, I forget. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, in a vision, you can do things like that.
I think more than it being, it's not necessarily a main point that it's a vision, but that is one of the main things that if you're talking to somebody about Revelation, I think that's one of the main things that you need to stress when talking.
Yes.
Because there are so many things that are kind of misleading if you take them literally.
Yes, they are.
Or taken out of context.
Yes, they are. They sure are.
Not the main point, but something that should be stressed.
Yes. Walker, I
one, literal, or you pick creative. You don't flip flop back and forth. If you try that, flip flop back and forth, you're gonna be so confused.
Correct.
That, I mean, I really, this is the best I've ever had that I've studied this Revelation and stayed with it. You stayed with it. We tried to go off rabbit holes multiple times, but you kept saying, and that was your watchword, in the vision.
Yes.
And remember, this is not a literal, beast crawling out of this.
No.
It didn't happen.
No.
Nor is it going to happen.
No. And the time, and another thing that will keep you on track is the time element. Okay, chapter 1 and chapter 22. If you abide by the time elements, you have squashed it down to where the time element affects the people to whom the book was written. And that was the point of the book. It was written to who? The 7 churches of Asia. And to put it all off, as our premillennial friends do, and they can do that, they want to, is to make it, to me, wholly irrelevant to the people in the first century. And this Antichrist business. And this, all of it. In fact, I've got a slide presentation on premillennialism I did here about 20 years ago. Yeah. Any other,
Well, I was just gonna say that if you took, if Revelation wasn't even in the Bible, the resulting other chapters, the message would be the same as it is in the vision.
okay.
The end result with Revelation in the Bible, or Revelation is not part of the Bible, what is taught at the end is the same. It's the same. The doctrine is the same. In the vision, they overcame, but in the rest of the chapters of the Bible, it's the same.
Yeah, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. And I find great comfort in that. Now, some people in this class have expressed disagreement or concern about it being limited by those time elements in chapter 1 and chapter 22. Because they see it as being irrelevant for us here tonight. I don't see it that way. I just don't see it that way. I see that God promised them, and He also promises me, as long as I overcome. Okay, I've got a different set of temptations from what they had, but still the objective is to stick to Jesus, and I'll guarantee that you'll overcome. He doesn't guarantee I'll live through it, but He guarantees I'll be an overcomer, and I'll be raised, exalted to reign with Christ, as the vision says, is one way of saying it. Monica.
I have a book that came from our library at home, that was from our old school days. And there are 5 points in here that I think might be real good to read. One says that the words of this book are faithful and true. This is the grand premonition of the angel who revealed it, of Jesus who inspired it, and John who wrote it. That upon all who keep the words of this book falls a blessedness. That the Lord, not an angel, not a man, should be the object of our worship and our devotion.
That's in there twice.
That man should neither add nor take from the word of God. Upon the ones who attempt to do so, so falls a curse. But the Lord is coming not to set an earthly reign, but to terminate all earthly affairs, to render to each man according as his work is.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that was a combination of this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Every point. Yeah. Any final remarks? Concerns? Questions? Complaints? I'm glad you folks don't have a bunch of stones. I think there was some when we went through this, we're ready to stone me.
That's been a very good class.
You just didn't go far enough when we started talking about the Pope. But I forgive you on that.
Well, thank you. Being forgiven is a good thing. All right, now next week, we will get into, and if you need to, we will look at some of the points in your introduction to Ezekiel. Notice he starts with Manasseh, because that's where things started downhill and were not going to change. That was Josiah's father, believe it or not, I believe. No, Ammon and then Josiah. And that's why it starts with the Judean king Manasseh, because it lays the foundation of the disaster that Ezekiel finds himself in and witnessed. By the way, Ezekiel was a contemporary of what great prophet? Jeremiah. They were, in fact, I think I read this afternoon, they were the same age. They were very close to it. All right, let us pray. Lord, we thank you for getting the teacher and the students through this difficult class, and we hope that the lessons learned we can carry with us throughout our life. And we ask again your blessings as we look into an Old Testament prophet, a great Old Testament prophet, and try to learn the lessons from Ezekiel. Bless us as we go in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. It's been a long, profitable, well, nice trip. Yeah. Thank you. I've got some introductions to Ezekiel up here if you would like. Yes, sir. I am too. Hallelujah. Jody, you got any questions about the word or chapter?